good evening, and welcome back. Yay! I hope everybody had a good summer. It was a wet one, it was a little humid. I felt like I was back down south a bit, but it was good. I'm grateful to see each one of you here this evening. My name is Sheryl McWilliams. I'm a wellness specialist here at Midcoast Parkview Health, and we're delighted to have you here for our Food for Health program. So I'd like to introduce to you my sous chef, who's crying. This is Lily, my daughter Lily. She became a teenager since some of you saw her last. And I have to say, these purple onions are incredibly strong. Even I was crying a little bit earlier. Sorry, Lily, I should have warned you. At home, just so you know the trick, at home, we put an open flame candle. So not a candle that's down in a deep well, but an open flame candle between us and the onion. So it would be right here. You kind of got to be careful, but that'll take care of it. I also have in my house the fan over my stove is like a jet engine. So I get next to the stove and do it, and it sucks it right out the house. In fact, my husband is painting on that side of the house, and he smells garlic and onions coming right out the vent. So anyway, glad that you're here. Tonight we are going to talk about Asian Miso Quinoa. This was a new recipe to us, but I've really enjoyed it. And I did make a few little tweaks, which we'll talk about.
Sheryl, do we have recipes usually?
Yes, you do have recipes. We do. Lily, can you pass these out for me, please, ma'am? Thank you. So, the first thing that we're going to do is get our quinoa cooking. So I actually already cooked it because it takes about 10 minutes to cook it. So I put a half a cup of quinoa with a cup of water, and you boil it down. So quinoa is a grain. It's rich in a lot of nutrients, protein being one of them. And it's super easy and fast to cook, and you can use it in lots of things. I've used it in the place of rice in some dishes. I actually have put it in bread. Back when I was making bread, I'd grind it and put it in bread. It's a very versatile grain, but the thing that I like most about it is it's so easy and so fast to cook. 10 minutes and it's done. And all you got to do is put it in a pan, a pot, pour the water on it, put the lid on, and boil it, and it's done. And then once the water is completely absorbed, I turn the heat off, I leave the lid on and let it continue to steam for a little bit while I'm chopping all the rest of the onions and vegetables or whatever else. And when I make quinoa, I normally make a lot more than my recipe needs, because I use it for other things. And if I have any left over, I stick what's left over in the freezer because it freezes really well. All right? So that is quinoa. So it calls for a cup of red onion. Now, in my family, if a cup is good, a cup and a half is better, maybe even 2 cups. So I tend to be very generous with onions, garlic, and ginger. And I buy my quinoa, usually buy my quinoa in bulk. And I keep it in a container down in the cellar. Okay, so we've got our onion, and at home I would use this whole onion, just saying. But for the purposes of demonstration, we'll do that. A tablespoon of ginger pureed. I just use a zester and ginger. Now, when you do your ginger, a lot of people will take the knife and try to peel the ginger off. Oh, forget that. Just take a spoon and the skin will come right off. Because if you try to peel it with a knife, you're getting actually a lot of the flesh and it's wasting. So if you just take a spoon, the flesh will come right off. And I use a zester. Excuse me, the skin will come right off. I use a zester. Thank you, Lily, for already having done this for the most part. And it goes right down. If my zester is dirty, I also have a microplane, like grater that I'll use. So about a tablespoon of ginger, and then garlic. We've talked about garlic in the past, but for those of you who are new, I buy my garlic in bulk, although we just pulled ours from the garden. So it's now hanging up in the foyer of my house. Actually, there's loads of garlic hanging from the ceiling. So we'll process that soon. But what I do is when I get my garlic, I just take it all, when I buy it in bulk, it's already peeled. When it comes out of my garden, I peel it, and then I stick that raw garlic in a food processor, and I whiz it down. I mince it in the food processor, and then it gets a spatula, and it gets scraped right into ice cube trays, right? And then those ice cube trays go into the freezer. So when I need garlic, I just get an ice cube of garlic, right? Because that garlic that you buy in the bottles is gross. It doesn't even have any flavor. It's a waste of money, and it serves no purpose for my taste. But if you freeze it, it's just like a fresh, clove of garlic. Keeping in mind, my husband left, otherwise I'd poke at him. Keeping in mind that a clove of garlic is just one tiny little piece. It's not the whole bulb. Some of you have heard the story before of my husband who went to make hummus, and the recipe called for 3 cloves of garlic, and he thought a clove was the whole bulb. That dude put 3 bulbs of garlic in the hummus, and the unfortunate part was that he had tripled the recipe. There was 9 bulbs of garlic in this hummus, and he would not throw it away. That every ounce of it was eaten, and he had no mosquito bites that whole summer. He didn't have any friends. We had to sleep in different rooms. No, I'm kidding. It was entertaining. So we've cooked our quinoa. We've got our onion, our ginger, our garlic, and we're going to saute that right in the pan. And I just want it till it's tender. In China, we lived in China for a while, and they don't go so much by how it looks as how it smells. They know that it's cooked the proper amount by how it smells. I'm not quite that gifted yet, but we'll cook that down a little bit. And then while that's cooking, we would then chop our vegetables. Now, I have to say, my mom reminded me of this last night. Mama wave. That's my mom, Margie. So she was over at my house last evening, and I was chopping vegetables, and she's like, "Oh, you need one of those choppers." And I'm like, "I don't need another implement in my kitchen." But as I'm standing there chopping I'm thinking maybe I do. But, just a little bit of vegetables, it doesn't really matter. Because I made what you're eating tonight here, I did not do this. But at home, I keep the end pieces. So you guys saw Lily chop that onion. She chopped the end pieces off that onion. That gets put aside. The end pieces of the carrot, that gets put aside. The end pieces of the pepper, that gets put aside. The stems of mushrooms, that gets put aside. The stems of cilantro, that gets put aside. And then all that's been put aside goes into a pot with lots of water on top, and it simmers on the back of my stove. All right? Garlic skins, any of those pieces of vegetables that you're typically going to throw away, I keep it. And if I don't have enough in one sitting, I'll keep it for 2 or 3 days, in a jar or in a pot in my refrigerator, accumulate it, and then I cover it well with water and simmer it on the back of my stove. And then you've got fantastic broth, vegetable broth. You can use that to saute your vegetables in, You can use it as a stock for your soup or your sauces or whatever, but don't waste that nutrition. There's a lot of nutrition still left in the end pieces. What I don't use is the papery skin from the onion, because that can actually be a little bitter. But the end pieces of the onion I absolutely use. The skins that you peel off of the ginger, that goes right in that stock as well. And then once it's nice and colored, it looks like tea, then you just strain it, and you've got, last time I did it, I had 1.5 quarts of, really nice broth. My mother-in-law, we have to puree most of her food, and so I use that. That's the liquid that goes in her lunch and her supper, when we're pureeing it. Or that's the base for a soup, or it goes in ice cubes, and I plop an ice cube when I want to saute my vegetables. Does that make sense? So don't waste that nutrition. You worked hard for your money. So utilize every ounce that you can. All right. It's not completely cooked, but for the purposes of tonight, we'll call that good. So it calls for 1.5 cups of cooked quinoa. We're just going to plop that right in there. And because I didn't fluff it very well, it is a little bit sticky, but you get the idea. And she's just going to cook that down. And then it calls for 1 cup of bell pepper. It's a little more than 1 cup, but extra vegetables never hurt anybody. 1 cup of carrot. Now you'll notice the carrots are different colors. I have purple carrot, orange carrot, and white carrot. And I like the color variation. The darker and richer the color, the more nutritional value a food has. So I like those rich colors, especially of that purple carrot. And since this is my family's lunch tomorrow, I'm going to put some extra in. There we go. And then 1 cup of cabbage. Now, on the carrot, the recipe says to julienne your carrot. Does everybody know what that is? Yeah, you cut it so it looks like matchstick pieces. I never do that, so I didn't do it for you. The first time I made this recipe, I actually did do that because I'd never made it before. So I did it the way the recipe said to, and I will never do it that way again because that takes forever. So I made it for you tonight the way my family's going to get it tomorrow for lunch. And that is just chopped super finely. And the same with the purple carrot, with the purple cabbage. It said, to slice it super fine. I did, and I got tired of doing that, so I chopped it, which is fine. Okay. So we've got our quinoa, our onion, ginger, garlic, pepper, cabbage. Now, it calls for 1 cup of frozen edamame. What are edamame beans? Soybeans. It's green soybeans, right? For those of you who've been around us for a while, you know what kind of soy do we eat? Organic. What kind of soy do we not eat? That's right. We don't eat non-organic soy. We also don't eat isolated soy protein, soy isolate, soy protein, any of that kind of stuff, right? And because I was not able to find organic edamame, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, but this time I was not able to, I'm using peas, green peas. You can use them interchangeably in this kind of recipe. There you go. All right. We got that going good. And then we're going to put it on a platter. You can pour that right into here when you're ready. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the dressing. It calls for a tablespoon of miso. Miso is made from soy. So what kind of miso do I use? Organic, that's right. It's on sale right now at our local natural food store. So when it's on sale, you might want to grab some if it's something that you enjoy. So I've got my miso. I'm going to use some tahini. What's tahini made out of? Yeah, it's made out of sesame seeds. Now, you can get it raw or you can get it roasted. I usually get mine raw. There is an expiration date on it. Mine I will keep for a few months and then I use it. It's kind of like peanut butter. I keep my natural peanut butter in the refrigerator. I keep this in the refrigerator as well. But all of the jars will have an expiration date on it. But I do definitely keep it in the refrigerator. And then it calls for a couple tablespoons of honey. I got this at a little farm stand in Bodenham. You can use dates as well. When you're making this kind of sauce, you will take a date, a dried date, cover it with some water, hot water, and let it sit, and it'll get nice and soft. And then you can whiz that up in your blender or food processor. It'll get all good and nice and mushy, and you can use that in this type of recipe and these kinds of sauces. Say you're making a peanut sauce or you know, this kind of sauce. You can use dates as well, and that's nice. Calls for 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Now, in these kinds of recipes, I absolutely use fresh lemon juice. It makes a difference. Now, I do keep in my refrigerator bottles of lemon juice that I will use for some things. A sauce or a dressing type of thing, I don't. The flavor is not the same. But so I always squeeze that. Calls for a tablespoon of, could you rinse that well for me, please? A tablespoon of sesame and half a teaspoon of salt. I usually use about half of whatever the salt says, because you can always add more if you need to. So there's my tablespoon of sesame seeds. It calls for a tablespoon of ginger puree. I'm not going to bore you by doing more, but you can imagine that this was a whole tablespoon. And then that's it. You want to stir that up for me? Now, back to our salad. It calls for 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds. White and black. There's a little bit of a taste difference. Yeah. If you don't have black, you don't have to use it. I just think it's fun because I like the color, and the more color, the more nutritional value. So that's what it looks like. How colorful is that, right? And then you're going to drizzle your dressing over the top. And I meant to bring kale because the recipe does not call for kale, but I like kale in this. And I ran out of time to go to the garden to pick any. I had some in the refrigerator and totally had a blonde moment and left it. I would put it in with the rest of the raw vegetables. And then if I wanted to be fancy, I would actually chop this, but you could, tear it, put cilantro around, and there's your pretty dish. Isn't that fun? Isn't that pretty? And it tastes yummy. So you eat with your mouth and it tastes good, and you eat with your eyes and it looks good. Alrighty. So give us just a couple minutes here to get cleaned up, and then you'll get to sample what I just made.